Chapter 5, Conducted Electrical Weapon / Dart Firing Stun Gun. This is Chapter 5 in the High Liability book. We start with CEW basics. A conducted electrical weapon, CEW, is a device that uses a high voltage, low amp electrical charge to induce pain compliance or involuntary muscle contractions that can, in the case of a dart firing stun gun, temporarily incapacitate a non-compliant subject. An ampere is a measure of electrical current or power. A CEW has several forms and names: basic stun gun, dart firing stun gun, electronic immobilization device, conductive energy device, electronic control device. In 2006, the Florida legislature created Statute 943 of the Florida statutes. This legislation governs the training and use of the dart firing stun guns by criminal justice officers in Florida. So again, it's the Florida statutes that governs the training and use of the dart firing stun guns. The Florida legislature. The Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission does not endorse any specific type or brand of CEW. So just remember, the CJSTC does not endorse any specific type or brand. When it comes to maintenance and care, keep the device clean and dry as much as possible. If it gets wet, make sure to turn it off and place it in a clean, dry place until it dries completely. And of course, never test it while it's wet. Authorization to use a CEW. The Florida statutes require law enforcement officers authorized to operate a CEW to attend a CJSTC-approved CEW course. So to clarify here, the Florida statutes require law enforcement officers to get training, and the CJSTC provides that training. In addition, the CJSTC requires that you attend at least 1 hour of annual training on CEW use if your agency allows you to carry and use a CEW. So again, Florida statutes require you to get the training, the CJSTC approves the training, and you are required to do at least 1 hour of that training. When to use a CEW. Your training, experience, and assessment of all relevant circumstances determine the appropriate and necessary use of a CEW. The statutory guidelines in 943 provide the minimum criteria for use of a CEW. A decision to use a dart firing stun gun must involve an arrest or custodial situation, and during the situation, the subject escalates resistance from passive physical resistance to active physical resistance. And, two things here, has the apparent ability to physically threaten the officer or others, or is preparing or attempting to flee or escape. So again, decision to use it has to be arrest or custodial, and during the situation, the subject escalates from passive to active, and then they have the apparent ability to physically threaten the officer or others, or is preparing to attempting to flee or escape. Using a dart firing stun gun must involve an arrest or custodial situation where the subject escalates. Okay, that's what I just read here in bold. How a CEW works. A CEW disrupts the body's communication system by generating a high voltage, low current electrical charge. In simple terms, the charge has a lot of pressure behind it, but not much intensity. So again, the CEW, its main job is to disrupt the body's communication system. Since it has a high voltage, the charge will pass through heavy clothing and skin, but it is not intense enough to damage the subject's body unless you apply it for extended periods. So again, it's heavy enough to go through clothing and skin, but it will not damage their body. Let's see. In smaller doses, electricity is harmless. CEWs use electrodes or probes and an electrical charge to control a subject. So just to kind of recap here a little bit, low current is safe, high current is really bad for you. And voltage, whether it's high or low, doesn't hurt your body. So low current is safe, high current is bad. Voltage high or low doesn't matter. And then with electrodes and probes, I think we'll get to that here in a second. Let me see. In the case of a basic stun gun, the electrodes attach to the front of the CEW. And with a dart firing stun gun, the probes are projectiles that fire from the CEW and embed into the person. So again here, electrodes are on the front of the CEW, where the probes is what shoots out with projectiles. Then next we have the probes on the dart firing stun gun are not fixed, and the distance between them depends on how far away the subject is when they're delivered. The wider the probe spread on the target, the greater the effectiveness of the weapon. So again, you want that far spread, whether it's all the way down to their ankle, all the way up to their abdomen area. And make sure you know that the probes on the dart firing stun gun are not fixed. So those are the things, again, the projectiles that come out. So just we reiterate that. Probes fire out, and the electrodes stay connected to the device. Exposing a subject who is standing in water to a CEW does not cause electrocution or increase the power applied. So questions always came up on the test where it was saying, hey, they're standing in a puddle of water. can you use a dart firing stun gun, or they're throwing soda cans all over the floor in a gas station and it creates, obviously a lot of wet mess everywhere. Can you still use it? And the answer is yes, you can still use a CEW here. Where you can't use it is if it's pouring outside and they're soaked, you're soaked. That's not a good time to use it. Let's see. The charge combines with the electrical signals from the subject's brain, making it very difficult for the subject to decipher any messages. The person has a hard time telling their muscles to move and may become confused, unbalanced, or in the case of a dart-firing stun gun, incapacitated. The current, sometimes generated with a pulse frequency, mimics the body's own electrical signals. The current will tell the subject's muscles to do a great deal of work in a short amount of time, and depending on the shot placement, the subject's torso and limbs will respond in different ways. So then we move on to the basic stun gun. The basic stun gun typically operates using a 9-volt battery, and typically between $20,000 and $150,000 volts. Let's see here. So again, with the basic stun gun, it's 9-volt battery, 20 to 150,000 volts, and it's about the size of a flashlight, and it's for pain compliance only. This one does not fire out the probes. So this one's only pain compliance, 9-volt battery, 20 to 150,000 watts, and the size of a flashlight. Then we move on to the dart firing stun gun. The dart firing stun gun uses the same basic firing mechanism as any compressed gas firing system or BB gun. So again, it's similar. That was on the test. Similar to BB guns, similar to that type of firing system. The main advantage of this design is that it stuns subjects from a greater distance, typically 15 to 25 feet for patrol and 35 feet for SWAT. The disadvantage is that if only one probe hits the subject, the officer must reload and attempt a second one. All right. So again, with the dart firing stun gun, it's you need to be 15 to 25 feet away, but the max usage for this is 35 feet. So if they ask for the max, it's 35 feet. But if they ask specifically for patrol, that's 15 to 25 feet. All right. If one probe hits the subject, the officer must reload and attempt the second one. Then we move on to the effectiveness. So versus a dart firing stun gun versus a basic stun gun. So just remember, with the dart firing stun gun, it's more effective because it has neuromuscular incapacitation versus just pain compliance. So the basic stun gun is only pain compliance, where the dart firing stun gun is neuromuscular incapacitation. So basically their muscles, you mess up with those communication system in the brain, and the muscles do more work than they're able to, and basically the person is unable to control themselves. The dart firing stun gun generally causes fewer injuries, generally requires fewer cycles, and can be applied from a safer distance. A cycle is the predetermined amount of time, usually 5 seconds, that a stun device will discharge automatically when activated. So 5 seconds is how long the first cycle will go on its own, and then of course from there you generally would have to pull the trigger again for another 5 seconds. Using a dart firing stun gun as a drive stun. A drive stun occurs when the front of the dart firing stun gun, with or without a live cartridge, directly touches the body of the resisting subject, and the electrical charge passes to their body. So again, you can use the dart firing stun gun as a basic stun gun, where you just push it up against them, which is called a drive stun, and hit the button. In this mode, the dart firing stun gun works as a basic stun gun and is a pain compliance tool only. So if you use a dart firing stun gun as a drive stun, that is pain compliance. It doesn't get the muscular incapacitation. Okay, circumstances when you may use a dart firing stun gun as a drive stun include when the subject is too close to you, or when a probe application would be hard to make. For example, if a subject and officer are fighting and the dart firing stun gun operator cannot get a clear shot on the subject, the drive stun does not incapacitate a subject, but may help you take a subject into custody. Another example is when only one probe strikes a subject and the subject is rapidly moving closer, use the drive stun as a second probe to complete the cycle. So basically, it would have 2 at that point, because one hit, the other one missed, but when you apply it somewhere else, it makes that circuit. When, after initially using a dart firing stun gun, you do not gain compliance or the subject increases resistance, apply the drive stun as a follow-up. Drive stun on a place on the body away from the embedded probes. So again, when you apply the drive stun as a follow-up, because maybe it wasn't the first 2 probes weren't enough, you can continue to drive stun, but you make sure to drive stun away from the embedded probes, because to create a larger circuit. When you use the dart firing stun gun with a live cartridge as a drive stun, or make a close shot and the subject increases resistance, apply the drive stun as a follow-up. Drive stun on a place of the body away from the embedded probes. If the first choice of a target area is not effective, you may consider a different area of application using an additional cycle of application or an alternative force option. Let's see. Because the drive stun does not cause incapacitation, you may find yourself in prolonged struggles with a violent subject, resulting in drive stunning several times in several locations. This often results in scratches to the subject's body and numerous signature marks. Signature marks are burn marks left on a subject's body after a drive stun application. Now we move to effects on the human body. A subject may experience pain similar to the muscle pain one experiences after vigorous exercise. In the case of a dart-firing stun gun, this can cause physical incapacitation, or also known as electromuscular disruption, EMD. So again, physical incapacitation is also called electromuscular disruption. To deduce possible effects of using a CEW on a subject could include the person immediately falling to the ground, yelling or screaming, involuntary muscle contractions, freezing in place, feeling dazed for several seconds or minutes, having vertigo, having critical incident amnesia, not remembering any pain, showing minor signature marks from contact, and so on. Several law enforcement groups have established that 15 seconds of CEW exposure as a significant safety point. So with this one, just remember it's a safety point. It's not required, it's not regulation, it's not research. That's just several law enforcement groups kind of establishing this 15-second rule being a safety point. Experts in the field agree that there is no definitive number for how many exposures are necessary, but applying the reasonableness standard may help you decide. So again, experts in the field say there's no definitive number, but that make sure to use the reasonableness standard that we've talked about in legal. Then we have target areas. The primary target areas of a subject's body should be below the neck area for back shots. So again, for back shots, it's literally anywhere below the neck. Then we move to front shots. The target area should be below the heart, and you aim for areas with high nerve concentration or large muscle mass, such as the abdomen, legs, inside of the thighs, back, and buttocks. So if you're looking at the front, you need to shoot below the heart, so you're not getting that chest area, and obviously not the groin area, but everywhere else would be free game. The physical positioning of a subject, the clothing they are wearing, and the way they are wearing clothing could play a big role in how effective the CEW is. Then we have subject considerations. Subjects of CEW can exhibit specific behaviors that may make them subjective to sudden in-custody death syndrome, SICDS. For more information on, from Chapter 4, okay. SICDS may be triggered by excited delirium or a drug-induced psychosis, which is a form of psychosis from drug use that causes hallucinations, delusions, or positional asphyxia. So again, some symptoms could cause someone to go into sudden in-custody death syndrome, and this could be triggered by excited delirium or drug-induced psychosis. And drug-induced psychosis is psychosis from drugs that cause hallucinations, delusions, and positional asphyxia. It is difficult to predict a subject's risk for SICDS. Pay attention to the signs of excited delirium or drug-induced psychosis, which may include psychotic behavior, disorientation, intense sweating, great strength and tolerance of pain, delirious or delusional behavior, paranoid behavior, pulse rate is high, and knowledge of the subject's history or drug use. If a subject is pregnant, ill, or physically impaired, such as blind or deaf, avoid using a CEW for compliance. Your agency will have policies and procedures for these situations. So again, pregnant, ill, physically impaired, such as blind or deaf, you should avoid using them, but obviously check policies and procedures. Then we have our use of force considerations. So remember when we talked about the objective reasonableness, when how many times you should be applying it, that comes from Graham v. Connor, which was discussed in legal and defensive tactics. You must be able to articulate why you chose to use a CEW. And according to Florida statutes, officers may decide to use a CEW only when a subject is resisting actively and physically. The court established law on the case of a CEW in the case of Draper v. Reynolds. So just remember, Draper v. Reynolds is the taser case law. The officer attempted to handcuff without the use of the CEW. The situation would have escalated into a serious physical struggle. So the one-time shock of a subject with the CEW was not excessive force and was reasonable. As described in 790 of the Florida statutes, a dart-firing stun gun is a non-lethal, which is a force level not intended to cause death or great bodily harm. Many law enforcement agencies, however, describe the CEW as less lethal. So if it comes up in a question on the test or the SOCE where it's saying, is the dart-firing stun gun, non-lethal, less lethal, lethal, deadly force, whatever you want to say, the correct answer is non-lethal. I doubt it's going to come up. If it asks from a law enforcement position, then obviously that'll be less lethal. But if it comes up in the book or the test, any of the tests, it should be non-lethal. So again, CEW or dart firing stun gun is non-lethal. Tactical considerations: make sure to use verbal commands first to gain control of a situation. You must not use a CEW for verbal defiance, belligerence, punishment, or horseplay. Here we go. If you encounter a subject in an elevated location, such as upon a ledge or stairwell, if you fire a CEW, the subject may fall and get hurt. So a lot of situational awareness when it comes to safety considerations. You're not going to stun somebody in the middle of the highway because cars are going by. You're not going to stun someone at the edge of a cliff, on top of a house, on top of a car, someone driving a car, things like these kind of considerations where they can hurt themselves after the fact. If you use OC spray on a subject, the CEW could set the subject on fire. So again, if you cannot use OC spray and then use CEW because it has accelerants inside the OC spray. So don't use the OC spray on a subject and then the CEW. You have to kind of pick one or the other in that point. Using backup. Try to have at least one backup officer present to handcuff the subject after you gain compliance. So the goal of a CEW is the dart firing stun gun is get that hit, they fall, your backup runs up and quickly handcuffs them. That's kind of the goal of this. It's not just to sit there and keep tasing them until they're no longer moving, right? When it comes to the backup officer, you won't get shocked as long as you don't put your hand in between the probes or actually touching the probes. Let me move to aftercare and treatment. Make sure that after all signs of resistance are gone, treat removed probes as biohazard sharps. So that was on the test, might be on the SOCI. Make sure to treat removed probes as biohazard sharps. Make sure to monitor anyone in custody who has been subjected to CEW use, even if the subject is receiving medical care. Then we move to documenting CEW use. Make sure after each time you use one, prompt and accurate reporting of the decision to use it, including an explanation of each use and the cycle of application. All right, last page here. Current CEW policy issues and trends. Be familiar with updated department policies, procedures, and case law regarding the use of CEWs. Make sure to note that if a subject begins to roll, once you do the dart firing stun gun, they start to roll away from you. Make sure to close the distance, move with the subject, and keep sufficient slack in the wire to maintain electrical contact. Subjects may wait for the cycle to stop, then pull out the darts and possibly begin to run away. Be prepared to close in and use a drive stun or transition to another force option to stop the subject from escaping. So this was definitely a test question. It said there was two different ones here. If the subject begins to roll, what do? You close the distance and you move the subject and keep sufficient slack. And then another question was, if this does happen and they pull them out and begin to run away, you're going to close the distance and use a drive stun. The option was to dart fire another round, but that wasn't the answer based on the book. The answer was to close the distance and do the drive stun. And let's see here. CW must be lethal. Okay, so here we go. The person must be carrying CW for use as lawful self-defense. So when it comes to this, normal people carrying, normal people are allowed to lawfully carry CW openly or in a concealed manner without a permit. But the CW has to be less lethal, of course, and for defensive purposes only. Side note before we conclude this chapter here, every bullet point that was discussed in this video was on the test in some form or manner. We had a really good teacher on this one, and basically everything that I brought up was on this test. So if you're taking the block exam, really focus on these portions that were discussed here. And if you're studying for the SOCE, whether or not these questions even appear on there is a different story, but these were all important for the block exam. And that concludes Chapter 5, Conducted Electrical Weapons.